It started with an idea. The Great Kingdom. Its name is like a fusion dance between Great Britain and United Kingdom. And doesn't the map of the Great Kingdom kind of look like the map of the UK? Yeah, but if the ancient Great Kingdom is a representation of the United Kingdom, shouldn't it also include Northern Ireland as a separate island? Well, it could easily be behind those tall buildings, I suppose. The Great Kingdom can be roughly divided into these three regions, not dissimilar to the way the UK is divided up. These mountainous structures could mirror the most mountainous regions of the UK, which is Scotland. And this region here with the grandest of buildings matches the location of England. The Union Jack is literally 3 crosses representing 3 countries combined to make a unified symbol. To say that we've seen varying crosses in the story already would be an understatement. Crosses are literally everywhere in One Piece, and they represent different ideologies like faith, order, and piracy. What if the flag of the Great Kingdom was also multiple crosses combined? A flag to symbolize a kingdom formed by the union of multiple countries and factions. We're well aware that Oda is yet to use British references in a pivotal way. It's surprising given that One Piece is an ode to human culture and civilization, and a pirate story no less. It was at this point that I knew what I had to do. Go gear Kuso, scratch that itch, follow the white rabbit, and as always, go down the rabbit hole. As a great man once said, geography is everything. And you know what? He was absolutely right. Now, apologies for the late introduction. I'm Kusoland, back with another unique theory to get your brain juices flowing. This one is Geography Piece. If you find yourself appreciating the theory, or want to reward the sheer time and effort it takes to produce all these assets and complete each of these videos, do me a favor and sub to the channel, hit that like button and share it with your Nakama. It'll just mean that I can keep releasing more videos for your enjoyment in the future. Shout out to Vex, Cube, Will, Dexter, Nick and Lucas on Discord, who helped me out and brought some extra details to my attention. Check out their links in the description below. Stick around to the end so you can ask yourself why this theory wasn't already on everyone's radar. Now then, grab a cuppa and let's get cracking. Let's start with the basics. So, Great Britain and the British Isles are both geographical terms. Great Britain refers to the largest island, while the British Isles includes all the islands in the region. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, is a political term referring to a sovereign state made up of 4 countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The Union Jack, as I mentioned, is made up of 3 crosses of 3 different saints: England's St. George, Scotland's St. Andrew, and Ireland's St. Patrick. Cross Guild, currently made up of 3 former Shichibukai, could very well be an homage to the Union Jack. Even other alliances in the story, including the alliance of Luffy, Kid and Law. Luffy's Thousand Sunny, a lion, the national animal of the UK and a symbol of kingship. And speaking of ships, Kid's ship, the Victoria Punk, is a nod to Queen Victoria. Even his name, Eustace Kid, phonetically becomes Eustasakito in Japanese, UK. He even straight up has a crew member called UK. Law with his Beatles hairstyle and the Polar Tang, a literal yellow submarine, and his name of Trafalgar and Waterloo, the battles where Napoleon lost and was defeated by the Brits. So an alliance formed between 3 different groups of people all tied to the UK. Fittingly, the Union Jack parallels the compass, a symbol befitting an adventurous pirate story like One Piece, and serendipitously, the initials of the countries forming the UK are N, S, W and E, North, South, West and East. The British Empire is the greatest empire in the history of the world. At its peak, the British Empire had the most colonies in all of history and spanned approximately 35 million square kilometers, covering nearly a quarter of the world's land area. England was also a pivotal force in piracy, first fostering it as a tool for expanding their own influence and establishing colonies across various regions, and then later eradicating said piracy to protect its growing empire. The country's privateers helped shape the age of exploration, while its pirates like Edward Teach, John Rackham aka Calico Jack, Anne Bonny and Bartholomew Roberts became legends. Treasure Island, written by Scottish novelist Robert Louis Stevenson, popularised modern depictions of pirates. Additionally, Great Britain's role in the triangular trade of rum and the global influence of the British East India Company show how integral the UK was to the history of piracy. And these elements perfectly fit in the scope of One Piece. And yet, the UK has not been featured all that much in One Piece as of yet. Don't get me wrong, we've had plenty of references scattered throughout, but when we consider epic arcs celebrating specific cultures, like Alabaster for Egypt and India, Water 7 for Venice, Dressrosa for Spain and Italy, or Wana for Japan, we start to wonder why the greatest empire in human history, deeply rooted in the history of pirates, isn't already playing a leading role in the story. The most logical explanation is that Oda is holding off on referencing the UK and its empire. For what, you may ask? Well, clearly for the Void Century flashback. But what references to the UK have we already had in the story so far? Aegis Kingdom, whose ruler is King T IV, donning this on-the-nose British attire and whose ship's figurehead is the UK's national animal. Aegis, on the other hand, is derived from Igidesu, meaning the UK, and Eikoku, also meaning the UK but in kanji. Rommel Kingdom, with the silhouette of Big Ben. Its citizens were terrorized by Cavendish's split personality Hakuba, slashing people in the night, which of course is a nod to Jack the Ripper, and to Jekyll and Hyde, a character from the imaginations of the aforementioned Scottish novelist Robert Louis Stevenson. London in Japanese is London, and Rommel in Japanese is Lommeru, London, Lommeru. Even Goa Kingdom and Fuchsia Village is at least in parts a celebration of England, Fuchsia being an homage to Norfolk in England, while the steampunk attire of Goa reflects Victorian England's fashions and etiquette. The national animal of the UK is lions, which, as I'm sure you've noticed, is heavily incorporated in One Piece and symbolizes kingship and the sun. Kingship, sun. It's crystal clear that the lion represents Joyboy. If we also consider the Japanese Shishi lions, we even have Komachio, Shishilian, Zoru Shishisonson, Sulongs aka Shishi Lions of the Moon, Shikis, Shishi Oroshi, and Hold'em Shishinohi, just to name a few. Son of a bitch, that was super hard to say. Emu sits on a throne, decorated by two lions. Does this hint that Mirijoa once belonged to the Great Kingdom, or that Emu defeated and conquered the Great Kingdom? Or maybe both? The Alabaster arc, inspired by Egypt and India. Both countries were once British colonies. Alabaster was also ruled by Crocodile, a British character inspired by another fictional British pirate, Captain Hook. Crocodile is also Sir Crocodile, Sir being the honorific of English knighthood. Circling back to the UK and its connection to the sun, Crocodile's partner is Miss All Sunday. Meanwhile, Mr. 3, with 3 being sun in Japanese, shows his British pride through his fashion and tea-sipping habits. And after all, Alabaster is the kingdom of the sun. There's also other British characters like Edward Newgate, Miss Buckingham's Tusi, and the real-life Blackbeard, who is also British, even though this one here is Somalian according to Oda. But then again, parts of Somalia was British colony, so I guess it works either way. And then there's Big Mum, Charlotte Linlin, most likely a reference to Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. She was the wife of King George III and the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, and is known as the longest-serving Queen Consort. Queen Charlotte was also just one child shy of sharing the record of the Queen bearing the most children in recorded history, which ties into Big Mum and her disturbing number of children she popped out. Big Mum is also based on the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, an absolute classic set in Victorian England, and we even get other references like the White Rabbits and Branch's Mirror World referencing Through the Looking Glass. Hilariously, Oda even references the Queen of Hearts' iconic habit of ordering beheadings through pound. Pound, of course, is also a reference to the pound cake, but is also the currency of the UK. Totoland, whose kanji means all countries, is a prime connection to the Great British Empire. This is made even more relevant by the fact that the British Empire spanned approximately 35 million square kilometers, and Totoland also had 35 islands. Even if we look at St. George, the patron saint of England, whose cross is featured in the Union Jack, we can draw significant links to Joyboy and Luffy. For instance, St. George was known as a dragon slayer. In a Middle Eastern region, he rescued a princess who was offered as a human sacrifice to a dragon. St. George defeated the dragon with Escalon, depicted as either his sword or his lance, depending on the version of the story. This aligns with my emu is a dragon theory and the fact that Nika's silhouette shows him clearly holding a sword and a lance or a spear. If we also consider the depictions of the halos and historical depictions of saints, we can see a direct connection to Luffy's straw hat. Even the colours associated with St. George and England are very Luffy-esque. Now, am I saying that Luffy is modelled after St. George? Not necessarily, but it could hint that we're onto something. Finally, I've thrown around Lamu as being the name of Joyboy in past videos, derived from the Japanese romanization of lamb, ram, and rum, all written in the same way as Lamu. Well, St. George's flag is commonly depicted with the Lamb of God as a symbol of Christ and his victory over sin and death. So, all of this to say that UK is bound to be mega important. After all, Kaido's epithet is Hyakuju no Kaido, meaning Kaiju of the Beast, but his epithet is also a play on Hyakuju no O, meaning the King of Beasts, which typically refers to lions, the national animal of the UK. Then there's Shanks, the red dragon, which is the national animal of Wales. Finally, Buggy is the undisputed leader of the Cross Guild, which as I mentioned connects to the Union Jack, which means that the former and current Yonko each represent the UK in significant ways. Now, if the Great Kingdom was truly inspired by a combination of the United Kingdom and Great Britain, we also have to account for Northern Ireland. Geography is everything. Wano is a country directly inspired by real-world Japan. Ringo, hakamai, kibi, udon, and kuri. Although written in different kanji, they translate to apple, white rice, prosa millet, udon noodles, and chestnuts. These are all food products specialized in different regions of Japan. Even the locations of Wano match up with real-world Japan, from Aomori at the top, known for its apples, all the way down to Oda's hometown, Kumamoto, at the bottom, specializing in chestnuts. The flower capital in the middle aligns with both Tokyo, the current capital, and Kyoto, the former capital. Finally, Onigashima, ruled by Kaido, is cheekily matched with Japan's northern island, Hokkaido. Hokkaido, Kaido, you get the idea. This attention to detail shows that Oda takes geography very seriously. This is why it doesn't surprise me that the map of the Great Kingdom somewhat matches the map of the United Kingdom. Just as Onigashima was integral to Wano, the island representing Northern Ireland will play a key role in the Great Kingdom. Not only that, Oda actually makes a habit of designing large islands with a smaller island plonked right next to them. We've had Wano with Onigashima, Dressrosa with Greenbit, Sabaody Archipelago with the base of the Flying Fish Riders, and Skypiea with Angel Island. In each case, the smaller island played a significant role in the story. So here's the hypothesis. The Void Century was only about 600 years into the Sea Circle calendar. What if the Sea Circle calendar marks the age of sea travel, while the Age of Heaven represents the era of air and space travel? Iceberg has the goal of turning Water 7 into a floating ship, but you see, whatever this current timeline can do, the Void Century did even better. As the genius Vegapunk stated, even with his abilities, he is not able to reach the levels of the advanced technologies of the Great Kingdom. So if Iceberg dreams of a floating island ship, the Great Kingdom was likely able to turn their island into a flying ship. No surprise, since Ghibli's Laputa, the Castle in the Sky, is one of Oda's inspirations. Oda even famously said, "I want the voice of Pazu to play Luffy," which is why we now have Mayumi Tanaka as Luffy's voice. So when the Void Century achieved flight, the smaller island representing Northern Ireland may have been left behind as a result. This would create a parallel to Onigashima, which took to the sky, and would mirror Jaya, which was shot up to the sky to join Angel Island. Even in Dressrosa, we got a nice scene of Fujitora and his flying mini-island and a literal flying ship. And what about the base of the Flying Fish Riders in Sabaody? It's all about flight. Now, if I was to guess which island in the world of One Piece represents Northern Ireland, I'd say that it was the island of Ohara. Hear me out. Clover symbolizes the clover of Ireland, and his recently revealed name of Clow is possibly a reference to Clive Solish, the Sword of Light which appears in Irish folktales. I mean, if we were to consider Funkfried, who appears in the same arc as Clover, could the Cloudy family be the ancestor to the quote-unquote Sword of Nika seen here? After all, a Sword of Light would be fitting for a sun god. And so, if Nika and Joyboy wielded a sword of Irish origins, wouldn't the United Kingdom be the missing piece for the mysteries for the sun god and the Great Kingdom? But anyway, back to Ohara being Northern Ireland. Ohara is actually an Irish surname. Saul is also the name of a village in Northern Ireland, which is believed to be the location where St. Patrick began his mission to convert the Irish to Christianity. St. Patrick's Cross, if you remember, is also one of 3 crosses featured in the Union Jack. Even our beloved Saul is basically Oda taking the mick. A leprechaun with their great red bushy beard are small fairies, and Oda flipped it to make Saul a giant who's larger than life. In Irish folklore, trees are much more than just plants. They hold deep and powerful meaning. The oak tree, for instance, is sacred and associated with wisdom, strength, and a connection between the physical and the spiritual worlds. Tree spirits and fairies were also believed to inhabit trees. Robin is also referred to as a yokai by the other kids on multiple occasions. Yokai, which are akin to fairies in Japanese folklore. Ohara is also confirmed to be inspired by Liverpool Central Library and the British Museum in England. The pheasant too is also historically significant in the UK. And then there's a famous folklore surrounding the Giant's Causeway, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located on Northern Ireland's north coast. According to legend, a giant named Finn McCool built the causeway as a pathway between Ireland and Scotland. Do you remember when Aokiji created an ice path connecting Ohara to another island, telling Robin that following it would lead to land? Finally, let's examine the map of Ohara as shown to us by Clover. We can speculate the full shape of the island based on the topographical details. Now, let's compare this map to the shape of Northern Ireland. You see it yet? What about now? Maybe it's just me, but when comparing the overall shape and its bumps and dips, I see quite the resemblance. This large lake is particularly fascinating, as when the Tree of Knowledge began burning, the books from the library were tossed out the window and into a lake. A lake next to the Tree of Knowledge at the island's center. Just think about it, the first ever mention of the Great Kingdom, and the first time we see its map is on Ohara through Clover. How insane would it be if we found out that the first time we learnt about this ancient kingdom was on an island that had actually once been part of it? Now before we move on to the next section, here's a headcanon. What if the territory of the Great Kingdom's empire was what we now call the Grand Line? I think this main island could have been called something like Britannia Island, basically a play on Buccaneers and Britannia, which in Japanese becomes Buccaneer fused with Britannia to become Burikania. Clever, I thought, if I do say so myself, since not only are we incorporating Britain into the name, we're also alluding to the idea that the kingdom was likely made up of buccaneers who worshipped the sun god Nika. I mean, at this point, most of us think that giants, ancient giants, or buccaneers were somehow involved in the Great Kingdom in some way, right? Especially if we consider that the last buccaneer in the story was Kuma, based on the legendary British pirate Bartholomew Roberts. But not only that, if we look at the Japanese version of the names and read it backwards, we get Nika and Karibu, which in Japanese means the Caribbean. Which, I mean, come on, the Caribbean has over 7,000 islands, and the journey through the Grand Line begins with one of 7 paths. On top of that, buccaneers was a term describing the pirates and privateers who operated in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. If the Grand Line is a representation of the Caribbean, an area historically dominated by the British, this theory starts to fit like a glove. Now, if the main island was Britannia Island, what might be the name of the kingdom and its empire? Well, Elbath was the name of the island and War Land was the name of the kingdom. Not to mention, there was also Toto Land, Longring Long Land, Wagomu Land, No Land, Uso Land, and Kusoland. Then we have a kingdom that absolutely dominated the Void Century to the point that it was called the Great Kingdom, or literally the Gigantic Kingdom. An empire on a grand scale. Grand Line. Land. Rain. Rainland. An empire and kingdom that worshipped the sun and was called Rainland, versus a kingdom symbolized by the sun waiting for the rain to return. Remember, Alabasta was originally meant to be the home stretch of the adventures of One Piece before Oda decided to extend the story to make it what it is today. So, the Great Kingdom was Britannia Island, and the kingdom and empire were called Rainland. Just a thought. But do me a favor and let that idea brew. 20 kingdoms allied with Emu to defeat Joyboy and his faction. The Levely is a conference of nations allied with the world government held every 4 years at Pangaea Castle to discuss and debate global affairs. In our world, we have the UN and the EU, 2 separate institutions committed to international cooperation, security, human rights, global development, and peace. World peace. One Piece. I've even talked in the past about how Luffy's dream, which ties into world peace, will connect back to Beethoven's 9th Symphony, Ode to Joy, which also happens to be the anthem of the EU. But did you know that 51 nations first founded the United Nations? Currently, 50 kingdoms attend the Levely. Between 1986 and 1995, the European Union had 20 members, the exact number of kingdoms who allied together to defeat Joyboy. Oda officially began working on One Piece in 1996. You see where I'm going with this? The UN has 5 permanent core members called the P5 who hold special status and powers within the system. On the other hand, the EU has 6 core founding members. But here's where it gets spicy. One country and one country only is a core member of both the UN and the EU, and that country is France. Now what if I told you that Emu and the Holy Land of Marijois is based on France? Don't believe me? Pangaea Castle is based on Chateau de Chambord. Check it out, the resemblance is uncanny. The Celestial Dragon's favourite food is lobster, which is famously associated with French cuisine. It's also Shanks' favourite food and Kuma's least favourite food. Super Express Lobster had God written on his head, and the kanji for Nerona Imu can be morphed into God and Buddha. So, lobster equals God, which equals emu and France. We know for certain that Oda does in fact tie lobsters to France because on the cover of Volume 7, we see Sanji, confirmed to be French, alongside Luffy, who has a tattoo of a lobster with homard written on it, which means lobster in French. You don't think that was a sneaky clue from Oda? It's also a nice contrast to Nika, which in reverse is Kani, meaning crab. Perhaps lobsters represent agents of Emu, whereas crabs, which kinda look like the sun, represent the agents of Nika. Sorry, I meant agents, not Asians of Nika. Nika. There's also Louis XVI, the last king of France, which connects with Emu's Gorose of 16. We even have Stelly, who imagined himself on the empty throne, and his wife, Sari Nantokanet, loosely meaning Sari something rather net, but is a reference to Marie Antoinette, the wife of Louis XVI. But the nail in the coffin is this. Emu, as I mentioned, is written like this, and can be morphed into the kanji for Buddha. Well, the kanji for France, would you believe it, is also Buddha. Yeah, Oda's not messing around. Emu is French. I explained in the past that certain Disney classics will be relevant soon, while Chateau de Chambord is the inspiration for the castle in Beauty and the Beast. Now humor me for a moment. I know I said the Great Kingdom is the United Kingdom, but let me throw another country into the mix. One that would be perfect to have gone up against the French Emu. A country that was excluded as one of the 51 founding members of the UN, but holds equal importance to France in the EU. And that country is Germany. Actually, a side quest here. Germany ties into a theory I have. I believe Joyboy the Haki Master died from poisoning. Think of Romeo and Juliet by the English playwright William Shakespeare. Bartolomeo drank what he thought was poison to save someone he loved. Bartolomeo, Romeo and Juliet. Honestly, this theory deserves a whole other video, but I don't have the time or the resources right now, so if you want regular content from me, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. That's honestly the best way to encourage me to keep going. Now, I know what you're thinking. I said an outrageous thing earlier, saying Germany ties into poison. I mean, you know, but it's not for the reason you're thinking. Like how France's kanji is Buddha, Germany is represented by a kanji pronounced as doku, meaning alone. It's used in words like dokuritsu, meaning independence, like when a country becomes an independent nation, and is also used for dokugan, meaning one-eyed. But you see, doku can also be used in wordplay for numerous spicy words that will make One Piece otaku squeal with anticipation. Doku can also tie into dokta, as in doctor, dokuro, meaning skull and bones, and doku when written with this kanji here, which means poison, and also loosely refers to virus, venom, germs, harm, or injury. So this one kanji associated with Germany can connect to independence and therefore freedom and liberation, to an individual with an eye patch, to doctors, skull and bones, and poison. I hope you're starting to see the vision. Now at this point you might be like, what the actual Kuso? You spent all this time trying to convince us that the Great Kingdom is the United Kingdom, but now you're saying it's Germany? Nein, I'm saying it's both. Like how Alabasta is both Egypt and India, Dressrosa is Italy and Spain, or how Fuchsia Village is England and the Netherlands. I'm proposing that the Great Kingdom is inspired by both the UK and Germany. And honestly, at this point in the story, if you're thinking that Oda is just going to pick one inspiration for a character, plot, or arc, you're kind of playing the game wrong. But let me cook. Now first off, if you have seen my Christmas Piece video, you know about my theory that One Piece is a Christmas story. Well, as I detailed in that video, Germany is the most significant country with the deepest connections to Christmas. Germany also ties into my magnum opus, where I stated that the answer to Luffy's dream lies in Beethoven's Ode to Joy, a piece which was played in celebration of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and a piece which symbolized the brotherhood of all of humanity. And if we go back to our roots, it's clear that Germany was on Oda's mind from the very start, with words often being written in German. But to prove that the Great Kingdom will be based on the UK and Germany, here are some examples that speak to it. Morgan is a Welsh name meaning seaborn or something rather, but he also has Merve meaning seagull in German across his jaw. Rommel Kingdom from earlier is connected to London, but Rommel is also a German surname. For instance, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was a German field marshal known as a tactical genius. Deo Kingdom or Doide Kingdom in Japanese is a wordplay on Deutsche, the alternative word for Germany. Its king is a chap by the name of Chap, who is clearly a fusion of He Who Must Not Be Named and Charlie Chaplin. Well, Chaplin, if you didn't know, was English. Then we have Big Mum's inspiration, Queen Charlotte, who was born in Germany and introduced Christmas trees to Britain. And remember the Whole Cake Island arc? Well, the main event of that arc was a marriage between Britain and Germany. Even Whole Cake Island itself, whose founders were Linen and Struzen, who is another German reference, since Struzen is a play on streusel, which is a German pastry topping. So Totoland, which parallels the British Empire, began from a partnership between Britain and Germany. And what about Drum Kingdom, an island based on Christmas and Canada, which is a country that used to be a British colony? Drum Castle is based on Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany, a castle which also inspired Disney's Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. Walpole and his pet Robson is probably a nod to Robert Walpole, the first Prime Minister of Great Britain. And going back to Germany being Doku in Japanese, Drum Island is riddled with Ds. The island's king is now Dalton, which by the way is a British name. It's also where we learnt about the Will of D, and learnt about 3 new D-Clan members, Ace, Blackbeard, and Roger, where we also had 3 Zoan Devil Fruit users whose abilities are animal-based. Animal in Japanese is Doubutsu. Drum Kingdom, the kingdom of doctors, Dr. Hidoduk, which probably comes from the German word Shiru, meaning surgeon. This is also a location where Dr. Chopper learns about the difference between Doku and Dokuro, poison and skull and bones. Then there's also Dokuritsu, which means independence. Canada is a country who gained their own independence. Drum Kingdom, in a way, also gained independence. Perhaps not in the traditional sense of breaking free from colonial or external powers, but Drum Kingdom could be seen as achieving freedom from Walpole's tyranny, symbolically liberating itself and entering a peaceful era, a kingdom reborn. All of this in volume 16, with 16 of course being Imu. I also mentioned in the past that Emu can mean doctor in Japanese, and I speculated that Emu may have been a doctor, which is another reason why I believe that Joyboy was poisoned to death, most likely by Emu. It's actually astounding how often poisons, doctors, Germany and the UK cross paths in the story. For starters, we obviously have Dr. Hidoduk, German, poison, doctor. Law is another doctor. He was poisoned by amber lead, is clearly British, but is officially stated to be German. Doc Q, which is a pun on doctor, and Doku, meaning poison. Crocodile, the British pirate, uses a poisonous hook. Krieg means war in German. He uses poison weapons and has a ship called the Dreadnought Sabre, with Dreadnought being a British term. Germa's firstborn child was, well hello there, a poison user, Reju Vinsmoke. Saint J. Garcia Saturn is based on Karl Marx, who was born in Germany. In his spider form, Saturn uses poisonous attacks to deliver a mortal wound to another doctor, Dr. Vegapunk, who is based on Einstein, the German theoretical physicist. And seriously, I'm just scratching the surface here on all the interconnections. But I don't want this video to be another Lisp piece, so Lisp piece apparently, goddamn, so I'm going to restrain myself for a change. But before I forget, when you cross Germany and the UK's national animals, the eagle and the lion, you get a griffin. Not much to say there other than fuck yeah. Hopefully, I've now thrown enough connections between Germany, the UK and all the D words and France at you, and hopefully something stuck. Now, I know this was a lot, but I've got one last thing I want to throw at you. Alright, here's a thought for you. What if Joyboy during the Void Century wasn't just a single individual? One Piece is set in a world full of kings and queens, so it's only natural that the Great Kingdom had a king too. I've already mentioned King T IV from Aegis Kingdom, the husband of Queen Charlotte, King George III, and Emu's potential inspiration, Louis XVI. These individuals being examples of kings with names passed down through royalty. What if Joyboy wasn't an individual, but a name and a title passed down within the Great Kingdom? In Elbaf, Loki's legendary devil fruit was passed down through generations of the royal family. What if Luffy's Hitohito no Mi model Nika was also passed down through the royal family of the Great Kingdom? If you consider the purple of the Nika fruit or the purple sash of the Nika form, its royal origins make sense. Historically, purple was a color associated with royalty. Tyrian purple dye produced in Tyre, modern-day Lebanon, was so expensive to make that only the wealthy elite could afford it. In England, Queen Elizabeth I famously set a law that prevented non-royals from wearing purple. This meant that the colour became synonymous with royalty in England. And you know what, if you mix the red and blue from the Union Jack together, you get purple of the Nika ability too. And so maybe Joyboy is the alias and title of the individual who were the kings of the Great Kingdom, and had the Nika fruit ability and maybe wore the straw hat. When Zunisha and Emeth address Luffy not as like Joyboy, but as Joyboy himself, this idea fits remarkably well. But if Joyboy is just the title of whoever's rocking the straw hat and are able to awaken the Nika fruit to become the warrior of white, then Luffy is legitimately Joyboy himself. It also means that Luffy has unknowingly become the king of the Great Kingdom, though unfortunately it no longer exists. Unlike Emu, who's holding on to immortality like a stubborn old bloke, Joyboy, who's more of an idea, has become immortalized. The idea of Joyboy will never die as long as there are those in the future who will inherit his will. And this idea of a costume, ability and title being passed down through generations? Well, it's not exactly unheard of, is it? Roronoa Zoro's inspiration, Zoro with 2 R's, is a great example of different individuals wearing the same mask and upholding the same alias. There's also Robin Hood in some versions of the story, Kamen Rider, and even Dread Pirate Roberts from The Princess Bride, whose title was passed down from one individual to another, creating a myth about an immortal pirate. There's also Master Thief Lupin III and Kaito Kid, who is a master magician / thief who also received his title from his father. Within One Piece, we also have our Easter egg character, Panda Man, who makes appearances in Everything Everywhere All at Once in the story, even in flashbacks going all the way back to Nolan's era. So, wouldn't it be fitting if the mask and title of Panda Man was also passed down through generations? Considering the Void Century that spanned 100 years, it wouldn't be surprising if even within the Void Century, there were actually 3 different Joyboys at least. Perhaps the Joyboy who was born in the Great Kingdom as its prince buggered off and set out to sea to parallel the story of Odin. But along his journey, he passed his hat and fruit to a new generation from another country and another race who inherited its will instead of passing them down through royalty. This was probably unconventional and broke traditions of the Great Kingdom, but this Joyboy had inherited Nika's will and didn't follow any conventions, living life freely like Luffy. So who knows, the other Joyboys during the Void Century could have been a buccaneer, merfolk, an oni, a giant, or maybe even a regular bloke. And it wouldn't have mattered. The Nika abilities allowed its users to transform their bodies at will to any size or shape since they were free. So the only way in which Joyboy's enemies and the rest of the world could recognize him through the ages was through his iconic hat, white hair, and his rubbery abilities. Lily, on the other hand, may have been immortalized by having her soul passed down. In my Love Piece video, I talked about the relationship between Joyboy and Lily, which I know is, ick for some of you, but just get over it. What if Lily was an immortal soul in that her will is passed down from one body to the next upon death, kind of like the life cycle of a devil fruit, or like just reincarnation? So perhaps each time Joyboy and Lily in their new forms meet again, one of them faces an untimely death. They are cursed to never end up together. Star-crossed lovers like Romeo and Juliet or Orihime and Hikoboshi, the Japanese star deities. Maybe the 2 lovers have been tied together since ancient times, going all the way back to Nika's day. Bloody Shakespearean, innit? And look, this whole there were multiple Joyboys thing is just a bonus theory. Take it or leave it. But personally, I think it beats calling a 100-year-old geezer a Joy Boy, or discussing a love story between a 100-year-old man and a young Lily. Also, this video isn't here to discredit other theories about the Void Century and the Great Kingdom being modelled after, ancient Greece, Rome, Atlantis or Mu. Instead, it aims to highlight an idea that hasn't been discussed in the community at all, despite the glaring connections to the UK and Germany. Right then, is there anything else I've forgotten to chuck into this video? The Great Kingdom is the UK and Germany. Emu is a French doctor who poisoned Joyboy. Joyboy is simply a title. Geography is everything. No, I think that's it for now. Let me know in the comments below, did you love it, hate it, or somewhere in between? Either way, subscribe to the channel for more regular content. Kusoland out. Peace!